It was an ordinary evening. I came home earlier than usual, the weight of the day still pressing down on my shoulders. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the television in the living room. I set my keys down on the entryway table, noticing Lily's bag lying on the couch, slightly open, as if it had been tossed there in a hurry. I had no intention of going through her things. I've never been that kind of husband. But as I leaned over to grab my phone from the coffee table, something fluttered to the floor. A thin, crisp piece of paper, slightly curled at the edges. A receipt. I picked it up instinctively, my eyes scanning over the details before my brain could catch up. Purchase: Rolex Oyster Perpetual. Date: 1 week ago. Amount: $7,500. I blinked, my grip tightening around the slip of paper. The weight of those numbers sat heavy in my chest. She hadn't bought me anything for my birthday, not even a card. A prickle of unease crawled up my spine as I stood there, staring at the proof of a purchase I couldn't explain. I turned the paper over, looking for anything that might clarify this situation. A gift receipt? A note? Nothing. My heartbeat was steady, but something in me had already shifted. A deep, instinctual knowing that told me something wasn't right. I inhaled deeply, forcing my face into a neutral expression as I walked toward the kitchen. Lily was standing by the counter, pouring a glass of wine. She looked up, smiling when she saw me. "You're home early," she said, tilting her head. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my voice even. I took a seat at the kitchen island, laying the receipt flat on the counter in front of me. "Interesting purchase. Who did you buy the watch for?" Lily froze, just for a second. It was subtle, the kind of thing you wouldn't catch unless you were looking for it. But I was looking now. Her fingers tensed slightly around the stem of her wine glass before she forced a tight-lipped smile. "Oh, it's a gift for my brother. He's been dreaming of one like this for a long time." Her voice was controlled, practiced even, but her eyes flicked away from mine too quickly. I nodded slowly, as if digesting her words. My fingers tapped lightly against the countertop as I pulled out my phone. Without a word, I opened the camera app and started recording. Her smile faltered. "Mark, what are you doing? Since when does your brother have a taste for Rolex?" I asked, my tone deceptively casual. She let out a small laugh, but it was forced. I could see her fingers fidgeting against the glass, her nails tapping a soft, uneven rhythm. "A nervous habit." "Well," she started, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. He's always wanted one, and I thought I'd surprise him." Her voice was higher now, thinner. I angled my phone slightly, making sure to capture every shift in her expression. The way she was suddenly too aware of the camera. The way her hand moved to smooth out non-existent wrinkles in her dress. The way she kept looking at everything in the room except me. My own face remained unreadable. "How come you didn't mention it?" I asked. "Seems like a pretty big purchase to forget." She shrugged, taking a sip of wine before responding. "I don't know. I guess it just slipped my mind." A $7,500 purchase, slipping her mind. I leaned back in my chair, watching her. She took another sip, her hand gripping the glass a little tighter this time. I let the silence stretch. People think confrontation happens in loud arguments, in slamming doors and screaming matches. But that's not always true. Sometimes, the most powerful moments are the quiet ones. The ones where the truth has already begun to reveal itself, and all you have to do is let the weight of it settle. Lily shifted on her feet, her eyes darting toward the receipt still lying between us. I finally spoke, my voice calm but firm. "Let's call him." Her head snapped up. "What?" "Your brother," I said, lifting my phone. "Let's call him. I'd love to hear how excited he is about the watch." Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. I tilted my head, waiting. A flicker of something flashed across her face, something quick and unreadable. And then, just as fast, it was gone. She let out another forced laugh, shaking her head. "Mark, you're being ridiculous." She turned away, placing her wine glass in the sink. But I could see the way her shoulders tensed, the slight tremor in her fingers as she reached for a dish towel. I pressed my phone screen, the quiet beep of the recording stopping. But I wasn't done. I stood up, picking up the receipt and slipping it into my pocket. Lily, I said, my voice softer now. Is there something you want to tell me? She turned back to face me, her expression carefully composed. But her eyes told a different story. And for the first time since walking through that door, I felt it, the shift. That slow, creeping realization that I was standing at the edge of something irreversible. Something that would change everything. And to the wife's benefit, at that moment her brother did not answer the phone, but her relief did not last long. That night, I lay in bed beside Lily, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. She had fallen asleep quickly, her breathing steady, her body turned away from me. I could still see the tension in her posture, though, shoulders slightly hunched, as if shielding herself from something or someone. The receipt was still in my pocket. I could feel the weight of it against my thigh, even though it was just a slip of paper. I had replayed our conversation over and over in my head, analyzing every flicker of hesitation, every nervous tick, every too casual deflection. It wasn't adding up. If the Rolex was truly for her brother, why did she look so uneasy when I mentioned calling him? Why hadn't she given it to him yet? And why, after all these years together, did I feel like I was standing next to a stranger? I exhaled slowly, careful not to make a sound as I reached for my phone on the nightstand. The dim glow of the screen illuminated the darkened room as I opened my browser. I needed answers. The first clue. The store name on the receipt led me to an exclusive boutique downtown. Their website boasted a selection of high-end timepieces, including Rolexes. I scrolled through the catalog, comparing models to the description on the receipt. It was a high-end watch, the kind that someone bought to impress. But not me. I checked my emails, my bank statements. No charges or alerts on our joint accounts. That meant she paid for it with her own money. Her separate account. That wasn't like Lily. I glanced at her, ensuring she was still asleep, then opened our phone records. My pulse quickened as I scanned through the recent calls. Most were routine. Her sister, a few work numbers, some unknowns. But one number stood out. It appeared too often, at odd hours. Sometimes early in the morning before she left for work. Sometimes late at night when I was already asleep. I copied the number and pasted it into a search engine. No name came up. Just a generic mobile provider listing. But that wasn't going to stop me. I needed more. The second clue. My fingers moved swiftly as I logged into her social media account. She had never been secretive about it before, but something told me I needed to dig deeper. I scrolled through her recent posts, vacation pictures, dinners with friends, a few candid moments from work. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I switched to my fake account, the one I had created years ago to check on deals in private groups. From there, I searched for her profile again. And that's when I saw it. A corporate party. One I had never heard about. In the group photos, she was there, laughing, holding a wine glass, looking radiant. And beside her, a man I recognized from the few times I had visited her office, Daniel, a father of two, married. The caption on the post was generic, thanking the team for a great night. But buried in the comments was something that made my blood run cold. Daniel, grinning in the photo, held a small box in his hands. A Rolex box. The best gift from a dear person. And beneath it, a single response from my wife. A heart emoji. I gripped my phone tighter, my breath shallow. I clicked on Daniel's profile, scanned through his photos. And there it was, clear as day. A close-up shot of the Rolex on his wrist. The same model. The same watch. The one from the receipt. The third clue. The walls of my reality began closing in. My hands trembled slightly as I exited the social media app and moved on to the next step. I needed undeniable proof. I knew Lily's habits well. She was meticulous about deleting messages, but she wasn't as careful with her cloud backups. I accessed her iCloud. My heart pounded as I navigated through the folders, bypassing the security measures I had set up for her years ago. And then, I found it. The text messages. I opened them, my chest tightening with every line I read. You are the best man in my life. I miss you. He suspected, but I hope everything will be okay. How I want to spend the evening with you again. Screenshots. Dozens of them. Their conversations stretched back months. Private jokes. Emotional confessions. Plans to meet when I wasn't around. Lily hadn't just bought Daniel a watch. She had bought him time. Time stolen from me, from our marriage, from the life I thought we had built together. I felt the sharp sting of betrayal settle deep in my gut. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I copied every message, every screenshot, every damning piece of evidence into a separate folder on my phone. Then I backed it up to my own cloud storage. I needed more. More proof. More leverage. More time to figure out how to handle this without letting my emotions take control. I locked my phone and placed it back on the nightstand. Beside me, Lily stirred slightly but didn't wake. I turned to look at her, really look at her. The woman I had shared my life with. The woman who was lying to me every day. She looked peaceful in sleep. Innocent, even. But I knew better now. I wasn't looking at the same woman anymore. I was looking at a stranger. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't want to reach out and hold her. I wanted to walk away. But not yet. Not until I had everything I needed. Not until she had no way out. I sat at the kitchen table long after Lily had left for work the next morning. My coffee had gone cold, untouched, as I scrolled through the folder of screenshots on my phone. Every message, every stolen moment between them, was there in black and white. Evidence of a secret life that she had carefully hidden from me. A scandal at home wasn't enough. Lily and Daniel had taken something from me. Trust, loyalty, the very foundation of what I thought was our marriage. But they hadn't just betrayed me. Daniel's wife deserved to know the truth. And their company, the place where they had blurred the lines between professional and personal, needed to see the reality behind their so-called workplace friendship. They thought they had been careful. They thought no one would ever find out. They were wrong. I composed the first message, attaching several of the most damning screenshots. To unknown number. Subject: your family deserves to know the truth. No introduction. No preamble. Just the evidence. I hesitated for only a second before pressing send. Next, I turned my attention to their workplace. Lily had always spoken highly of her boss, an old-school professional who valued company image above all else. A strict no inter-office relationships policy was in place, not just for ethical reasons, but because the company worked with high-profile clients who expected discretion and professionalism. This was exactly the kind of scandal that would get both of them fired. I composed a second message, this one to Lily's boss. To boss's email. Subject: serious violation of company policy. I believe you should be aware of an ongoing situation between two of your employees. Attached are messages confirming an affair between Lily, last name, and Daniel, last name, conducted during work hours and within your company. Considering your reputation and policies, I assume this is something you'd want to address immediately. No signature. No hint of where it came from. The moment I hit send, I exhaled slowly. And then, I waited. By noon, chaos had erupted at Lily's office. It started with Daniel's wife. I had expected her to be angry, but I hadn't expected her to storm into the building like a woman on a mission. Witnesses later told me she walked straight past reception, clutching printed screenshots in her hands, her expression unreadable. Security hesitated, unsure whether to stop her. By the time anyone could react, she was in the middle of the office floor. Daniel. Her voice rang out, silencing the usual hum of phones and keyboards. Every head turned. Employees exchanged glances, confused, as she marched toward his desk. Lily was in the same open workspace. Explain this, Daniel's wife demanded, shoving the papers at him. Daniel's face drained of color. He barely glanced at the pages before looking around the office, realizing all eyes were on him. He fumbled for words, his voice barely above a whisper. Babe, not here. Let's talk about this at home. Home? She let out a sharp laugh. You think we still have a home after this? She lifted the pages, reading aloud. You are the best man in my life. I miss you. He suspected, but I hope everything will be okay. How I want to spend the evening with you again. Gasps rippled through the room. Colleagues who had once greeted Daniel with friendly nods now stared in shock. Others murmured, pulling out their phones, probably messaging their own office gossip circles. Lily, who had been attempting to stay hidden at her desk, slowly stood up. She didn't speak. She didn't move toward Daniel. But she knew. Her hand shook as she gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles white. Someone from HR appeared, whispering urgently to Daniel, But before they could usher him away, the real damage had already been done. The office knew. Management knew. And by the end of the day, both Daniel and Lily were called into a meeting with their superiors. Given the company's reputation, the decision was swift. Termination. Immediate. Daniel's wife didn't wait for him to come home. She filed for divorce that afternoon. That evening, I received a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. A second call came, then a third. I finally picked up, saying nothing. There was silence on the other end before a shaky voice spoke. Mark. Lily. I could hear it in her tone. She knew. She knew what I had done. But I wasn't ready to hear her excuses. I ended the call without a word. By the time she got home, the house had already been stripped of her presence. Her clothes were packed neatly into a suitcase by the door. Anything she had left behind, her perfumes, the small trinkets she had collected over the years, had been boxed up and placed beside it. And on the dining table, where we had shared countless meals and conversations, sat the divorce papers. She hesitated at the doorway, her breath catching in her throat as she took in the scene. The realization hit her all at once. Her job, gone. Her reputation, destroyed. Her marriage, over. She turned to me, eyes filled with desperation. Mark, I can explain everything. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. A familiar voice, her voice, filled the air. Oh, it's a gift for my brother. He's been dreaming of one like this for a long time. The lie she had told me just days ago, now playing back in her own words. Her face crumpled. She looked at me, truly looked at me, and understood. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to salvage. She had already explained everything in her messages, and now she had nothing left. The days that followed the divorce felt strangely empty, not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that settles after a storm when the wreckage is still there, but the winds have passed. The house felt larger without Lily's presence, yet I couldn't bring myself to rearrange anything. Her absence was its own kind of weight, one that pressed down on the space, but not on me. I was free, and yet I didn't know what to do with that freedom. Then, one evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello? A pause. Then, a voice I recognized, but not well. Mark, it's Emma, Daniel's wife. I sat up straighter, gripping the phone. Emma, hi. I hope I'm not disturbing you, she said, her tone gentle but uncertain. I wanted to reach out. This whole thing has been a nightmare, and I thought maybe we could talk? She hesitated before adding, it might help to meet someone who understands what this feels like. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. It made sense. She was one of the few people who truly knew the depth of betrayal I had faced, because she had faced it too. Yeah, I said finally. I think that would be good. She gave me an address. Her parents' house. She had moved in with them after leaving Daniel, taking their 2 kids with her. We agreed to meet the next evening. A house full of warmth. Emma opened the door before I had even knocked. She looked different than I had expected. Not broken, not bitter, just tired. Her brown hair was loosely tied back, and she wore a soft sweater that made her look younger than I remembered. Come in, she said, giving me a small, welcoming smile. I hope you don't mind the chaos. My parents are trying to keep the kids occupied in the back. As I stepped inside, I was hit with the scent of something baking, cinnamon, maybe vanilla. The house was warm, lived in, filled with framed photos and comfortable furniture. It was the opposite of what I had been living in for weeks. A home, not just a place to exist. Emma led me into the kitchen, where 2 steaming cups of tea were already waiting on the table. I figured we'd start with tea, she said, sitting down across from me. Wine comes later. I let out a short laugh, the first real one in a while. She smiled back, and for a moment, the weight in my chest lifted. At first, we talked about the obvious, what had happened, how we had found out, the shock of it all. She had received my anonymous message at work. She had been in a meeting when the notification popped up, and the moment she saw the contents, she had excused herself and rushed out. I think I was shaking the whole way to the office, she admitted. wrapping her hands around the tea mug. I knew something was off for months, but seeing it right there, the messages, the way he spoke to her. She shook her head. I felt like I was in a bad dream. I nodded, understanding too well. We talked about the confrontation, how Daniel had tried to deny it until she pulled out the screenshots, how his face had crumbled when he realized there was no way out. She paused for a moment, then looked up at me. You sent those messages, didn't you? I held her gaze. There was no point in denying it. Yes. A slow smile spread across her lips. Thank you. I wasn't sure how to respond to that, but in that moment, I realized she didn't hate me for exposing everything. She was grateful, because while the truth had shattered our marriages, it had also set us free. After an hour, tea turned into wine. Emma poured 2 glasses, her movement slower, more relaxed now. This is the part where we stop talking about them, she said, raising her glass. I mirrored her action. To what? I asked. She thought for a moment. To healing? It sounded right. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was stepping out of the wreckage instead of standing in it. The conversation shifted, becoming lighter. We talked about everything but our exes, our jobs, favorite vacations, embarrassing childhood stories. She told me about her kids, how her youngest had just learned how to ride a bike, and her oldest had been trying to cheer her up by making bad jokes. You'd like him, she said. He's got that same dry humor you do. I laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. The warmth between us grew as the night went on. There was something easy about talking to Emma, something that felt natural. By the time we finished the second bottle, we were sitting closer than before. It happened slowly, a glance that lasted a second too long. A moment where our hands brushed as she reached for the bottle. A pause in the conversation where neither of us moved away. She was looking at me differently now, and I knew I was looking at her the same way. This is crazy, isn't it? She murmured. I nodded, but I didn't pull back. Neither did she. And then, her lips were on mine. It wasn't desperate or rushed. It wasn't about passion or revenge. It was something else entirely. It was the quiet kind of kiss, the kind that says, I see you. I understand you. I know exactly how much this hurts, and I'm here. When we pulled away, she let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. Well, that wasn't part of the plan, she admitted. No, I agreed, but I don't regret it. She studied me for a moment, as if searching for something in my expression. Then she smiled. Me neither. We didn't talk about where things were going or what this meant. We didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the past. I wasn't thinking about the betrayal or the anger or the life I had lost. I was thinking about the present, about the woman sitting across from me who had been through the same fire and had come out on the other side, about the laughter we had shared, the warmth of her presence, the way the world felt a little less heavy when she was near. Life wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like it was moving forward. And maybe, just maybe, something good was waiting at the end of all of this.